Greetings, friends and fellow travelers, and welcome to Life Mastery TV, your source for inspiration, empowerment, and fulfillment. My name is David McLeod, and I am your Life Mastery coach and author of the book, A Life to Die For, which I really hope you'll get a copy of. And I want to tell you, this is episode 155, and we're talking about Beyond the Conscious Mind. Now, this is a live presentation. I'd like to invite you all who are here to participate by posting your questions and comments in the chat area, which should be on the left side of your screen. And maybe you can all get a hang of it right now. Just type in your name and say hello and just let us maybe know where you're from. Meanwhile, I'm going to get started. So when it comes to calming the mind, a lot of people get hung up on the idea of surrendering their conscious mind. There seems to be a widely held fear that this kind of surrender leads to a loss of sovereignty or self-empowerment, which is actually the opposite of what happens. What people don't seem to understand is that when you surrender your conscious mind, also known as the ego mind, what you are actually doing is releasing its fear-based hold on yourself and thus allowing a greater communion with your true essence, which is where your true power resides. Now, my guest today is a widely regarded author, speaker, spiritual teacher, and master shaman who helps people bring light to their inner darkness in order to heal and thrive. As you will soon discover for yourself, he is insightful and knowledgeable about the human condition, and his depth of understanding rings with ancient wisdom. And as you can see here, I have two of his books in my own library. This first one is called Healing the Shadow, which I have had in my library since, I don't know when I got this, but probably around 2012 or 2013, and it is an awesome book. I highly recommend it. I also have this other one, which I purchased recently and haven't had a chance to read yet, but it's next on my list, and it's called About Life. So, and I know that my guest has another book that he's going to be telling us about here. But in the meantime, I just like to say welcome to my new friend, Ross Bishop. Welcome, Ross. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, David. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I understand that you and I share a common interest in something called psychic shadow. Now, this is something that I know some people may have heard about it, but maybe they don't know very much about it. And I know you've been studying this and learning about it for many years, as you shared earlier with me. And I really think this is kind of the probably the most rewarding area of work that anyone can do. And can you tell me a little bit about how you got involved in shadow work and how you started moving on that path towards healing through shadow?
Well, the simple answer was I was in pain. I was in corporate life, trying to do what I thought was my traditional trajectory, and I was miserable. It just wasn't working. I was getting by. I was being very successful, and inside it was just a wreck. So what I did is I quit and went to India. I was with Babaji for a while there, and I want to say it's like we control our lives, but truthfully, one day we went up for his blessing, and he reaches into his dhoti and takes this little piece of paper he'd written out, and it had this town in Chiapas, Mexico. And he said, "You go." That was it. It was the only English I ever heard him say, by the way. And so it was a matter of either you believe or you don't. And so 2 weeks later, I'm on the third rickety bus in the middle of the highlands in Chiapas, Mexico, get off in this town. This little guy is there to meet me. He says, "Come with me." We walked for 3 days into the jungle, and there was this shaman there who knew I was coming. And there isn't a telephone or a telegraph within 1,000 miles. and I'm going, what the fuck, so and I spent 2.5 years with him, learned a tremendous amount, but most importantly, I found inner peace. I found what it was I was looking for, which was outside everything I had been taught. So right. That's the short answer to a very long story.
Yeah, that seems to be the way, isn't it? That
Mhm.
the truth often we seem to want to look for the truth outside of ourselves, but then we discover that it's really not out there. Is that
Well,
kind of what happened
yeah,
for you?
yeah. Let me perhaps talk a bit about that in a more general sense. We all come in feeling wounded. Okay. And
Mhm.
and again, if you look around the world, that's 8 billion people or 7 billion people, I guess, all feeling the same thing. Now, there's no way that can be coincidental. It's got to be intentional. Okay. So we come in feeling hurt, and because of that, we retreat into our conscious minds. And the conscious mind is a place of protection. Its basic posture is to keep us safe in a world that doesn't feel safe
Right.
because of the woundedness. Okay. And so we get boxed into that place. um we it's fear based, it's very limiting. And the thing is, we're dealing here with then experience, which is what we build our lives on, rather than truth.
Right.
And because, how shall I say, because the other option isn't readily available, people don't see it. It's like all they know is their conscious awareness, their conscious mind. Um, and there's nobody really saying, hey, there's something else over here if you'll just stop for a minute and look. And
Right.
we don't do that.
No, absolutely true. And just so my audience understands, I use the phrase ego mind, and I believe that correlates almost
Yeah,
exactly with what you're talking
yeah.
about. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that we're talking about the same thing here. And my experience is, I agree with you 100% that the ego mind, the conscious mind, is basically designed to protect us and keep us safe from these dangers that are around us, which is very valuable when there's a real danger.
Well, and if I may interrupt,
Yeah,
and I want to separate physical harm from emotional harm, because physical harm operates under a completely different set of principles. I'm not going to deal with that today, okay?
right, right,
But
right.
in terms of emotional harm, what what we have to learn is that we cannot be harmed.
Exactly.
And that's a huge lesson for people, because we could talk about how I got to this understanding, but the truth I want to share with your people today is there are no wounds.
Right.
It's like the words that I'm saying dissipate the minute I say them, and the only meaning they have is what you give them.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, so if I'm inclined to be wounded, then what you say can hurt me because I will allow it. But
Hmm.
but for example, if I say something like, "Did you know you had blue hair?" You go, "What are you talking about?" It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't fit, because that's not in your reality.
Hmm.
But if I say you're not good enough, or you're inadequate, or you're not a worthy person, those are going to stick, because
Right.
that's what we've come to believe from that initial woundedness that we brought in.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah, this is really, really fascinating and definitely very much in alignment with my own understanding. And what I would like to just add to that is we have this whole concept of collective ego or collective shadow, which we have an entire society on top of everything that basically does everything in its power to strengthen this idea that you have to stay in your head, that you have to stay in your consciousness, that you have to stay logical and sensible and linear and scientific in everything you do, and to avoid anything spiritual or, let's say, right-brained.
yeah,
That's what the ego mind seems to want us to do, and the collective ego mind continues to enforce that in pretty much everything all around the planet.
well, you got the whole world built on fear. And
Yeah.
so it's like it just operates out of that premise. And nothing good is going to come from that,
Right.
except that we eventually learn that it's a bunch of bullshit.
Right.
And honest to God, that's the beauty of that process. Now, I didn't really respond to your earlier question, and I'd like to, please. The shadow, okay, is an extension of our fear-based system. It's like
Yeah.
when we operate from fear, then we separate from the truth, we separate from honesty and compassion, and we move into what you and I are calling the shadow side.
Correct.
And most people live there.
Right.
And so dealing with that really is about dealing and addressing that fundamental fear that we bring in, from above, if you will. And so that's what the struggle is essentially about.
Right. I'm sorry. I had to mute myself for a second. My dog was just making a noise. Anyway, I totally resonate for that. The way I understand it's I think it's the same as yours, but maybe different words or whatever. I always thought of, well, we have the ego mind, which basically creates for us a whole series of beliefs and thoughts and everything else that are, as you say, fear-based, that are designed to keep us safe and designed to hold us back from doing things that the ego mind imagines might cause us danger.
Yep.
And what happens is those beliefs become subconscious. They go down into the unconscious, and then we start maybe putting aside parts of ourselves that we believe might be bad or wrong or inappropriate or unacceptable. And those parts, which really are part of who we are, the full makeup of who we are, still are alive, but they're in our unconscious now. And so they may act out. And so we may find ourselves behaving in ways that we say in our ego mind, that's not like me. That's an accident. I didn't mean to do that. Yeah. And so that's really what I think shadow behavior is. Shadow behavior is not the same as unconscious belief, but shadow behavior, I think, comes from conscious belief, which is what I think you were saying, the extension part of it.
Yeah, it is. And I think about what you do when you're not afraid. I mean, really, it's that simple. It's
Right.
like when you are your true self, you're compassionate, you're loving, you're caring. It's when you get scared and when you're afraid of being hurt that you move into all this shadow behavior, and that's the defensive stuff that the conscious mind is designed to protect. So, we'll put it in a pejorative space, but I want to be clear. It serves a very important and vital function. So long as we're in that place, you got to have it.
Right.
It's that we need to learn to step beyond it, to step out of it. And well, I mean, I teach this. It's a very simple process. It's like when you don't hold compassion, it hurts.
Yeah.
And so if you just learn to listen to yourself, to your inner system, and say, what feels truth to me here? What in my deepest sense is right? Different ballgame.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Geez, I had a thought that I was going to share in here, and it was about the idea of shadow. But you said something that kind of tripped it, and now I'm losing myself here.
Sorry.
No, don't apologize. Well, I think basically the idea is this: everyone has shadow parts. There's just no way to avoid it, and I think what we all need to do is we can't avoid those parts of ourselves. As you say, we have this notion of being hurt, and if we allow ourselves to have that experience of being hurt and not really go in to heal it, then we just create more hurt. We basically shove it further and further down and try to hide it deeper and deeper in our essence, I guess, so that it becomes locked into our very tissues. It becomes locked into our bodies. And so we end up with physical problems that start to manifest. And some of those physical problems can be very, very extreme, all the way out to something like as bad as cancer, if we don't do the work necessary to heal those wounds.
And by the way, Marion is saying that I keep cutting out on her transmission. I'm sorry, Marion. I don't know what to do, but
well, actually, it's not cutting out for me, so it could be a problem on her end. I hope it's not, but anyway, hopefully the problem's gone away.
Think about disease, if you will, as a part of the closed circuit here. That if you don't listen and you don't listen and you don't listen, then something breaks down because of the inner tension that's created when you're not walking the path. As I said, when you respond out of compassion, okay, there's no backlash. It's like it just is beautiful and sweet, and it happens, no big deal. But step off the path and it hurts, and it hurts primarily internally. And so do that enough, and the universe is going to say, hey, you're not paying attention. We're going to break the system down. And it's either, do it or die. And that's what it comes down to.
Right.
What is
it? Yeah, as in the emotional / spiritual sense, we cannot be harmed anyway.
Yeah.
And so most of the fears that we have, which are related to the emotional, hurt or spiritual hurt, most of those fears are completely irrational, and they have no bearing in reality. And when we focus our attention on them, and as you say, do something like imagine what you're like if you're not feeling fear, then if we look at those kinds of false fears that really have no physical danger associated with them, most of them simply fade away into the darkness. Fade away, just go.
Nothing that happens in this world will transcend from this place. Everything stays here. There's nothing eternal here other than you finding your compassion.
Right. Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah, and that's a good point to remember, is that everything that's happening here on this physical plane is temporary. Whereas our spiritual essence, who we really are, is eternal. But we're here having this temporary experience on this plane in order to maybe learn something more about ourselves, or maybe expand our awareness of who we really are. It's a complicated issue, and something that sages the world over and for time immemorial have been trying to explain.
David, I will say, and believe me, I understand your point. It seems complicated because we make it so, but it is really extraordinarily simple, but it's really, really hard to do. And that's the problem. Okay.
I agree.
Like, I know what I got to do in every situation, but can I do it? Nah. Okay. And that's the dilemma that we get into.
Exactly.
We forget that all of this is a training school, or training ground, I should say, to help us to learn to reach our compassion. And I don't want to be misunderstood. I didn't say learn compassion, because you are compassion. It's who you are. It's who you naturally are when you're not afraid.
Yeah, that's
and so what life is about is giving us opportunities to go A or B.
Right.
You either step in with compassion, or you move from fear, and then you pay a price. And so the question is, how much of a price are you willing to stand to stay in that scared place? And that's the struggle with shadow, with negativity, whatever you want to call it, that we all have.
And that's a really good point, because it does evoke a cost to stay in that place of fear. It's a very expensive place to be. There's nothing beneficent about it. There's nothing good about it. It really doesn't serve us, except perhaps to help us become aware of the fact that we really are immortal spiritual beings, and we are, as you say, we are love and compassion.
Well, it does serve the short term, and that's part of the problem. It's like, if I protect myself from you, then I'm safe for the moment.
Right.
But in the long term, it cuts me off from what could be a dialogue here, and I lose because of that. And it's only when I come to realize what the price is that I'm paying, then I decide to say, wait a minute. Okay, I'm going to open my heart to Dave because I want this relationship rather than to live in my fortress of fear and isolate myself from him.
Right.
And the question is really, when am I willing to do that? And until I do that, I need my fear. I need the conscious mind, unfortunately, okay, because I can't cross the bridge yet. And that's the whole problem with the whole frickin' world.
Well, that's a good point too. I mean, we need our ego minds in order to be able to navigate through this physical world.
Yeah.
If we weren't in this physical space, we wouldn't need it. And we might not. And I think this is really, really important. And I know we've said this probably multiple times already today, is that having the fear helps you to understand why you don't need it.
It's crazy. It sounds, I know, but you're absolutely right. It's like the purpose of life is to chuck the conscious mind.
Right.
Is to learn to be safe enough that you don't need it. Because if you look at where we're going, it's a place of compassion and kindness and love and caring and sharing. None of the fear is there. And so to get there, what we have to do is transcend the place in us that is fear-based, let it go, call it surrender, call it whatever, and move to that place of trust and caring. And it's such a beautiful, special place. It's like once you get there, once you begin to get there, you look back and go, what the hell was I doing?
Exactly. And that's a great question. What the hell was I doing? I was creating that hell.
Yeah.
You're right. And it's something that many of us, because we're so focused on what we're doing, we get our attention to just taking one step at a time, trying to live this life, that we forget to look up and around and see what's really going on. It's no wonder there are people who say, take a moment, stop and smell the roses. Wake up and smell the coffee. They tell you stuff like that because they're saying there's more to life than just this tiny little focused thing that you're worried about right now.
Well, and what happens when you smell the roses is you shut off the conscious mind.
Yeah. And
it's like, oh, okay, there is this. And see, that's the thing. We don't realize there's this other place. It's like all we know is what we've got, okay? And even though there are thousands of teachers out there saying, love one another, we don't want to hear it because, as I say, we're not ready to cross the bridge.
Right.
Someday we will be, but it takes time. I was thinking the other day that in the 16th century, men lived in castles because they needed them.
Mm-hmm.
You live in Idaho, I live here in New Mexico, where, 15 or 150 years ago, everybody carried a gun because they needed to.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't do that anymore. So we're getting there. But sometimes it doesn't look like it, especially the last 3.5 years. But that's another story.
Yeah. Well, and you said something else. We do have these teachers who tell us to love one another. We have these teachers who say love is all that matters. Love is all there is. And yet, part of the reason I think that we resist that is our ego mind reminds us of all the evil people out there. How can you love all those evil people?
How many times have you been hurt?
Well, actually, I've been hurt a few times, but mostly it's been my own made up hurt.
Always.
Yeah.
Always. But the problem is, for us, it's still real. It's what we feel. It's what we fear. And we don't accept that it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
That is so hard. I don't mean to be judgmental, because it's tough. It's a tough thing to do, because, if we turn the other cheek to the guy who just slapped us, the odds are pretty good that he's going to slap us again.
Right.
And that's the dilemma. It's like, the lesson is contained deeply within the experience, but boy, it's hard sometimes to get there.
Right. Especially when you're in the middle of it.
Good point. Really good point.
There are very few people, I think, who are actually able to turn the other cheek right when they're being slapped. Very few. And those who can do it, I really honor them and I bless them. I suspect that if someone slapped me in the face, I would probably slap them right back before I realized I was even doing it.
Yeah, it's just so inbred.
Yeah.
And even if your reaction is to turn from fear or to back away, and again, I want to say you've got to protect yourself. So you don't want to put yourself in a situation that's physical, and that's
Correct.
the different. But I'm talking about emotional slaps. Okay.
Yeah.
If somebody slaps you emotionally, it's like big goddamn deal.
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry. It's just, oh, okay.
Yep.
Sorry you said that. Sorry you feel that way. And you walk.
That's probably what Jesus meant when he said, turn the other cheek. Yeah.
Well, and his interest was in helping us to move to, at the Last Supper, he gave the 11th commandment, which is love each other as I have loved you.
Right.
And that's what he was talking about. It's like, and it probably, as I think about it, the guy who emotionally slaps is the guy who needs love more than anybody else.
That's a very good point, and I've heard that said to me multiple times in the last few months. We seem to be coming to that awareness.
We are.
Which I think is very, very important.
Well, and COVID and global warming and Black Lives Matters, if you think about them in context, all are about caring for each other, caring for the planet. And it's like that for me is the real lesson of those dilemmas that we're presently struggling with. It's like they teach us that we need to care about each other.
Right. Yeah. I just want to take a pause for a moment and invite our guests, our people who are watching. If you have any questions or comments that you'd like to share, we'd love to hear from you. So please just put them in the chat and we will get to them as soon as we can. Meanwhile, Ross, you mentioned the word surrender maybe a minute or two ago. And given that that's our whole topic for today is about going beyond the conscious mind, what is it that makes it so hard for people to surrender in the first place?
We don't feel safe.
Okay.
I mean, in simple possible terms, if you feel safe, you surrender because there's nothing to hang on to. Okay. But if you're scared, if you're afraid to get, judged or condemned or criticized or whatever, then you're going to shut off. You're going to build walls between yourself and the rest of the world. And so, as long as we're in that place of fear, as long as we live under the umbrella of I can be hurt, you can't surrender. It's really difficult to do. It's only when you come to understand that hurt exists only in your mind that, and when you can release that and you can say, I'm really sorry that he said that. Gosh, I don't believe that. I'm not who, whatever. Then you begin to surrender.
Right. And so, well, here's an interesting thing too. I think surrender is often misunderstood. I think people assume that to surrender means to give up or to give in or to somehow capitulate, which I don't think is what it is. I think it's more about, I personally like to think of it more as just being accepting of what is rather than surrendering and giving up. Does that resonate for you?
Well, yeah, the problem is if you're in the context of fear, if you're in the context of being hurt, then it becomes surrender. And you know, then it's capitulation. And you know, you don't want that, okay? But if you're in a place where you know you cannot be harmed, what's interesting is then it's no big deal. You just do it, and it follows, if you will, night and day. It's just an extension of who I am rather than who it is I was.
Right, right. You know, I got an interesting question. I don't know why I've never asked this one before, but maybe you can help me understand it. I know that people in general seem to have probably one of their biggest fears is what other people think of them, how other people judge them, how other people perceive them. Why is that such a primal central fear in our system? I mean, in the reality, most of the time, people are not thinking about me all that much. You know, they're not judging me all that much.
Yeah.
And yet I'm worried about them judging me. So why is that? Why do we go through that process?
This can be a little hard to get your head around, but it comes out of the initial wounding, which is a setup. We get rejected by God and sent down here to earth. And so there's this wound that we carry inside, okay? And so then everything becomes an echo of that initial response. And that's so incredibly beautiful about this process called life, because it's a setup to help us to learn that this wasn't true in the first place.
Wow.
But you know, when other people start saying, I don't like you, or you're not good enough, or whatever it is, then that echoes this wound that we carry. And so it goes inside like a fire arrow, you know, and just, oh my God, you know, okay. And again, it's as you come to understand the truth about yourself, as you come to see the beauty of your being and respect yourself, then you begin to heal this inner wound. And then what other people say, frankly, it's like, okay, I want to listen to what other people say because I can learn from them. But beyond that, I don't want to be judged. I don't want to put myself in a place of, you know, living in what other people, you know, say about me.
Right, trying to satisfy them so that they judge you in the way you want to be judged.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting thing too, because I mean, I think I spent the first 40 years or so of my life trying to please other people, trying to live up to their expectations and what I imagined that they wanted me to be.
I know that one very well.
Yeah, that's a loser's journey right from the get-go. But I
still do it. Most everybody does it.
Yeah, and what I noticed over the course of time was I'm here busy trying to accommodate what other people expect of me, trying to let them fulfill all my wants and needs. And meanwhile, I see other people making their own choices. And I'm thinking, what the hell? How come they get to do it and I don't? You know, this is the story that's going on in my head. And so what I do is I end up getting really angry and resentful, and all that anger and resentment starts leaking out and hurting my family. And that's when my wake-up call came, when I was 40 years old. And, you know, I had to switch. I had to change my whole way of thinking. And I had to change my environment to get there.
Had to. Why, David? It's important. No, but tell me, why did you have to?
All right. Well, the have to comes from a belief that I held in the moment that there was no other way for me to heal myself if I stayed in my current environment. That was so. My way of shortening that is to say I had to get out of that environment in order to heal myself.
Most of us paint ourselves into corners.
Yep.
where there's nowhere else to go than to surrender. And that's the truth of it. It's like, yeah, it's a lousy road, but it's the only road we got.
And then what I discovered in that process was my initial reaction was to get out.
Yeah. Yeah.
However, I discovered that there is no out. The pain was all in here. And so I soon discovered that in is the only way out. And it's not really an out anyway. All it is an awakening, becoming aware, maybe even a surrendering. A surrendering, I think, is what I was doing, but I didn't see it that way at the time.
If you will, going in changes the game.
Yeah.
And I think that's the real secret for people to understand. It's like when you go inside, when you really get deep, what happens is that all of this just kind of falls away because it wasn't important in the first place. Right.
Yeah, that's well, in the grand scheme of things, really nothing is that important. Except, and what I've learned, I think the most important thing for all of us is to know the truth of who we really are. There's nothing else more important than that. And it's down here, man. It may not even be within, but it feels within, because I think the true essence of ourselves seems to emanate from our hearts.
It does. And it's like, how do I say this? It's like what I want to do is to open my heart to you, okay? And what's really important about that isn't you. I'm sorry. It's what happens for me.
Of course. Absolutely. And, well, if we go a step further, another thing that I teach people, there is no you.
Yeah. Okay.
There's only me. We are all one. We are all connected. And what I think when we talk about opening our hearts and actually trying to manifest a connection, what we're really doing is saying, I want to shut down this part so that I can feel this connection that's already there.
I feel safe enough that I can do that.
Yeah.
That's I got to feel safe. And the thing is, the damnedest thing is, we got to learn that there are no wounds.
Right.
That you cannot be hurt in the sense I'm talking about emotionally here. Physical is different set of rules, okay? But in terms of the emotions, you cannot be harmed.
Right.
And that is so hard for some people to grasp because they're so conditioned. They've lived with being hurt, and they don't understand that there can be some other way. I don't mean to be repetitive,
and this whole idea of being hurt has become a whole political movement now. Well, I mean, look what's happened. I mean, free speech has been curtailed because if I say something that might potentially hurt your feelings, then I am committing a microaggression against you. Which, my God, what are we doing? We're taking this thing to a whole new level of maniacal bullshit.
Yeah. A good word.
Well, that seems like that's what it is. I mean,
that's what it all is.
Yeah, it's insanity.
I mean, I'm sorry, but it's all bullshit. I'm sorry, but it is.
That explains the smell.
But the point is, the only real thing is here.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see this, but this is all that matters. Everything else is window dressing.
Yeah, yeah. And yet, look how attached we are to the window. And that's probably the biggest problem, isn't it? This whole notion of attachment. I got to have this new thing. I've got to have that new thing. I've got to meet this requirement. I've got to do this. Gotta, have to.
Why?
Yeah.
Why? Why do we do this? It's because I'm trying to cover over what I don't feel is in here.
Right.
It's like, so I'm going to plaster the walls with stuff. And the problem with stuff is that how do I say, when you attach to a thing, it's going to end badly because there's nothing in the thing to give you what you desire. And so it's a false premise, and that's how we create karma. But anyway, so it's like the only thing that matters is what's here. Everything else is going to die with you.
Right.
It's all going to evaporate when they put you in the ground, okay? The only thing that matters is what's here.
Yeah.
And we forget, we don't pay attention to it, we don't want to see it. I don't know, all kinds of reasons, but I think
also there's another part, and that is we do seem to enjoy the drama, don't you think?
Oh boy. Well, it fills the day.
Oh my God. We create all this drama and all this backdrop of all the egomaniacal bullshit.
But I'm serious. But it keeps us occupied.
Yeah.
It fills the space, because if you stop, what's going to happen? For most people, if they stop, they get scared.
Right. And that's a good point you mentioned, because it's filling space. And if we're not filling space, then I guess the ego mind's belief is, well, then I don't exist. If I'm not filling the space, I don't exist. And that's probably the biggest fear that the ego mind has. Ceasing to exist.
I think it's a little more, if I stop, I will get hurt. It's kind of like you can't hit a moving target or something. And so you keep dancing. And it's like, if you stop, then the steamroller is going to get you.
The steamroller. All right. So having this attachment is and enjoying the drama. Those are features that kind of make it resistant to the idea of
needing, not enjoying.
Pardon me?
Needing, not enjoying.
However, I mean, I enjoy it, but anyway, we have a need for it, and we've created an addiction out of it, actually, and so now we want to find a way to go deep, but we have to let go of that, and that's pretty scary. I have to give up this thing that I enjoy. I have to give up my addiction in order to be able to connect back to the truth of who I am.
And for most people, you have to be in so much pain that you'll give it up. And that's a lousy way to do it, but it's a way the creators seem to create the system. So it's like, okay, the harder you hang on, the more it's going to hurt.
Right. And that's another interesting thing, this whole idea of pain anyway. I mean, there's no way, you know what pain is, and I know what pain is, but there's no way for us to compare our pain and say mine is this high and yours is only there. We can't do that.
Well, again, setting aside physical pain, okay, there is no pain in the sense that if it's here, I create it.
Yeah.
And so, I don't mean to disparage people that are struggling with their own pain, but the point is, you got to look at what you do to create the disharmony in your life, because that's where the pain comes from, short of something physical.
Right. All right. So why is the idea of surrender itself so scary for people?
As I said before, I think it's just because I'll be hurt if I stop. If I give up my protection, then I'm going to be left naked here, hanging out in the universe with nothing. And that's the myth, because that's all we know. We don't know and embrace, if you will, God's love. I don't know how else to put it. Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But it's like, without that, then there's this feeling of emptiness that comes that says, well, if I give up this, which is all I've got, okay, there's going to be nothing here to replace it. And it's not true, but that's the belief.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, so if you were to offer, let's say I wanted to learn from scratch how I could get into that place of surrender, how would you guide me to do that?
Every situation, you've got two choices. You either move to compassion or you hold back.
Okay.
So the challenge is always, every situation, to move here and not here. In this moment, where is my heart? Where's my compassion? Where is my openness and lovingness to you, as opposed to my fear of being embarrassed and making an ass of myself and saying something wrong? Okay. I mean,
right.
that's the choice that I have in this moment. Okay. That's the choice you have in every moment. It's like you either love somebody or love the world or love yourself, or you don't. And when you don't, you pay a price.
Okay. So really the question for me in any given moment is, where is my love or where is my compassion right now?
You got to learn to listen to your heart.
Okay. But that is ultimately the question, right?
This ain't going to give it to you.
Yeah. That's right.
What feels right?
Yeah. That sounds pretty easy.
Well, again, in concept, all this stuff is ridiculously, stupidly easy, but it's damn hard to do.
Right. And it's hard to do because of all the stuff that we've been talking about up until now.
Yeah.
All right. So compassion is our ultimate objective. Compassion, when we talk about surrender, we want to get ourselves out of our heads and let go of the trappings of the ego mind and move ourselves down into our heart where our compassion resides. And then from that place, ask ourselves, what is true? What is right for me right now?
Yeah.
Is that a good summary of what you just said?
It is. And just to be clear, then there is another place which is beyond that, which unfortunately is unreachable by either words or the mind. Okay. And the only way you got to know it is to be it. But I just want to offer that there is another place that is beyond that one.
Right.
That's hardly worth talking about at this point, but yeah.
But you're not talking about just simple peace of mind, are you? You're talking about something like more like bliss.
I'm talking about, it's beyond bliss. It's like utter stillness.
Right.
I don't have words. I can't, the language won't serve. Correct. But it is a place. It's the next step.
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with David Hawkins, but I've read some of his books, and he talks about this in great detail. In fact, he's written probably 11 or 12 books about the subject, and they're pretty amazing books too. Yeah. Now, I understand you have another book that you have just published. Do you want to share that with us and show us a copy of that?
Yeah, the book is called Finding Inner Peace. Okay. Get it here. Okay. What I did is I sat down and said, okay, there's a shamanic journey process, which is the most powerful, profound process that humans have ever created. Okay. And I use that every day in my healing work. Okay. And then I also use a great many techniques that what I'm going to call are non-shamanic, okay, that I've garnered from and I'm a great thief. I'll steal from anybody, okay? And so what I did is I took those techniques and I collected them into this book, and then I had this wonderful illustrator or graphic designer. He did just a marvelous job so this is a collection of those techniques. So I offer them because with the shamanic journey process, it's really a good idea to have a shaman there with you. These you can do on your own.
Right. I've had a couple of opportunities to do shamanic journeys, and I have to agree, it's very, very powerful. It's deep, it's meditative, it's healing, and it's not really something that's easy to describe in words.
No.
And you say you've been doing this every day?
Just about, yeah.
Wow. And so do you use drumming for it, or do you have some other mechanism?
Used to. I just don't do anything anymore. I just show up and let it happen. It's, I guess, because I've been doing this for 40 years. You know, I can do that.
Right.
So for me, what's been fortunate is I do this over the internet, so I don't need the tools.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow. Ross, it's been just an amazing whirlwind conversation with you today. I'm feeling kind of tingly all over. I mean,
Good.
I just love the conversation. This is the kind of stuff I could talk about for hours on end. And so I really appreciate your taking the time out of your busy day and your busy schedule to be here and sharing this stuff with us.
Please understand, David, that's what I do.
Do you have something or any particular offer you'd like to make to the people here? And just, any words of wisdom before I close out?
Well, I'm going to post a link to a website which offers this book, and right now it's in pre-publication prices, so we got a deal on it. And the books are en route from Los Angeles to my house, so the price is going to go up here pretty quickly. But it's $18.95, and I offer it to whomever. And I think it's a great book. Yeah.
Well, of course. You put your heart and soul into it. It's probably a fabulous book. I mean, if it's anything like the other two that I have here, I'm sure it's wonderful, and I'm looking forward to getting a copy of it myself.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Ross. I'm going to close us out now. I want to thank everybody who was here live for the presentation for being here. I want to remind everyone that you can watch the recordings of this and every other show on my website at lifemasterytv.com. That's life-mastery-tv.com. And I really hope you enjoyed this presentation. I really do. I found myself feeling pretty tingly, as I said. And in a few hours, you're going to receive an email with a link to a feedback page. My request is that you go and spend a little time on that feedback page and maybe write us a review for this show. If you can bring yourself to do a heartfelt, authentic, genuine 4- or 5-star review, that would be awesome. However, I want you to speak your truth. I mean, not everything is for everybody, and maybe there's ways in which we can improve this even more. And I want to hear that from you too. So finally, I'd like to remind everybody to practice the Life Mastery mantra every single day. And it goes like this. I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. I gratefully welcome the evolved being I am becoming in each new moment. Until we meet again, I am David McLeod, your Life Mastery Coach, wishing you love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. Much love to you. Bye-bye now.